I'd like to call the hearing to order this morning, and today's topic and hearing will be on the Department of Energy's FY 2014 budget. Of course, this is the first opportunity that we've had to have our new Energy Secretary, Ernest Moniz, with us. And Mr. Secretary, we're delighted you're here. We know that you have a lot of experience at the Department of Energy, having served there in the Clinton administration. And I think all of us were quite impressed with the way you sailed through confirmation. I think the vote was 97-0, and that's quite a tribute to you, I would say. So congratulations on that confirmation. And I will recognize myself now for a 5-minute opening statement. Under the Obama administration, the Department of Energy, in my view, has often taken a back seat to the Environmental Protection Agency and was all too willing to acquiesce to EPA's agenda rather than affirmatively assert its own pro-energy agenda. In particular, DOE allowed itself to become a part of the administration's, for lack of a better word, attack on fossil fuels, when it should have been defending them as a core component of our energy future and a critical contributor to job creation, global competitiveness, and affordable energy prices. When I think about an anti-fossil fuel movement, frequently I think about Europe. And what has happened, Europe has placed so much emphasis on renewables and wind energy and solar. And when the natural gas prices started escalating in Europe, all of a sudden, in Europe, they're burning more and more coal now, and they're getting ready to build, on the books, they have plans to build 69 new coal-powered plants. I'm sorry, 69 new coal-powered plants, 60 gigawatts of new power. And so I think that it's important that we think about this instead of this administration has moved. The budget reflects most of the money is being spent on the renewable rather than the baseload energy needs. I'll never forget that Secretary of Energy Chu made the statement that coal is his worst nightmare. And I don't think that we need a Department of Energy that sees this nation's growing abundance of natural gas and oil as a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be embraced. The Department of Energy, in my view, should not treat conventional energy and renewable energy as an either-or proposition where the federal government actively discourages conventional energy in order to create an artificial market for renewable energy. The President says himself that he's for all of the above, and yet frequently in his administration that absolutely is not the case. We need a Department of Energy, in my view, open to all domestic energy sources that are economically competitive, be they conventional or renewable. All of the above, as I said, has supposedly been the President's motto, but his policies have suggested otherwise. In fact, yesterday I introduced legislation along with a Democratic member that would repeal a provision in the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 that would require that the federal government not use any fossil fuel for heating new or modified federal buildings by the year 2030. So our bill is in keeping with the President's stated goal of using all of the above, and yet that 2007 Energy Independence Security Act would phase out the use of fossil fuel in its entirety for any federal new building or modified building by the year 2030. I look forward to working with Secretary Moniz, and I believe that the proposed FY 2014 DOE budget that we will review today, as I said, still reflects the mistakes of the recent past and is not a forward-looking proposal. For example, we see in this budget an outsized, and I know that the Secretary certainly was not there at the time, but we see an outsized request for the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which we all support, a nearly $1 billion increase. And when you look at these numbers, you've got batteries and electric vehicles receiving more money than any other entity. Solar energy next, building technologies next, biomass next, and the conventional fuels are way down the list. And I don't think there's anything that reflects an administration's overall goals better than its budget request. So I think the shale gas and oil revolution in America holds tremendous potential for energy affordability and security, for job creation, for export opportunities, and for strengthening America's standing in the world. But it also poses implementation and innovation challenges for which DOE, in my view, can play an important role. DOE should be out in front of this revolution, taking steps to facilitate its development and not creating obstacles to it. So I look forward to working with you, Mr. Secretary. We certainly look forward to your testimony and your answer to our questions today. And with that, at this time, I'd like to recognize the distinguished gentleman from Chicago, Mr. Rush, for a 5-minute opening statement.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you, Secretary Moniz, for being here today to discuss DOE's FY14 budget, as well as the agency's overall energy agenda. Mr. Secretary, I believe you are heading one of the most important agencies in the nation, as the field of energy will hold the keys to unlocking America's creativity and innovative spirit, while also taking our economy to another level and providing an abundance of rewarding jobs and rewarding careers. In fact, as I have stated many times before this subcommittee, the country that leads the world in advanced energy technology, energy production, and clean and renewable energy breakthroughs will also lead the global race for economic superiority, and it's imperative that our nation remains in the forefront in each of these areas. I believe in all of the above energy agenda that encapsulates my 5 core principles. 1, safe and reliable and affordable energy for all Americans. 2, focus on STEM education and training. 3, jobs and economic opportunities for all segments of the American population. And 4, policies to address climate change. Lastly, North American energy independence over the next few decades. With the emergence of the shale and natural gas finds, as well as the Obama administration's commitment to investing in new advancements in clean and renewable energy technologies, I believe that it is possible to find the right balance between protecting the nation's air, land, and water supply through sensible environmental regulations, while at the same time ensuring that all Americans have the chance to share in the employment, the business, and the economic opportunities that the energy industry will provide. Since my ascension as ranking member on the Energy and Power Subcommittee in 2011, I have held a series of discussions with top energy leaders in the oil, gas, and renewable energy and pipeline industry, and we'll finally begin to make some headway in our efforts to ensure that minorities, that women, and that historically underrepresented groups are given the chance to fully participate in the lucrative and vastly expanding energy sector. Just 2 years ago, when asking energy leaders about the levels of participation of these underrepresented groups, the most common response that I would receive undoubtedly would be, "Sorry, Mr. Rush, We don't have that information. We'll get back to you. Today I'm holding serious discussions with top industry leaders on what they can do proactively to ensure that minorities and other groups are aggressively being recruited, aggressively being trained, and aggressively given the opportunities to participate in the energy field. Mr. Secretary, over the past year, my office has worked extensively with your agency, including your Office of Economic Impact and Diversity. And together we're making great strides in our combined efforts to increase minority participation in all sectors of the energy field, from increasing STEM education and training opportunities to assessing employment and business opportunities. Mr. Secretary, I look forward to working with you. I look forward to working with your department in close collaboration to make sure that all Americans are afforded the opportunity to benefit wholly in the energy area. Mr. Secretary, I am delighted to have you before this subcommittee. I believe that your department will play a vital role in pushing America towards greater innovation, greater prosperity, and greater energy independence. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Michigan, the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And today we do welcome the new Secretary, Secretary Moniz, to the committee to receive his testimony on the Department of Energy's fiscal year 2014 budget. You know, it's been 30 years since Congress enacted the Department of Energy Organization Act of 1977. That was a different time, a time of dwindling oil and gas supplies, rising energy prices, we remember those gas lines, and over-reliance on energy imports from unfriendly nations. In short, it was a time of energy scarcity and uncertainty. Fast forward 3 decades and our energy landscape is dramatically different. We've entered a new era of energy abundance, providing a level of energy security and certainty that was simply unimaginable just a few years ago. American ingenuity and innovative technologies have powered an incredible energy transition, turning the trends in domestic oil and natural gas production upside down. And according to the International Energy Agency, the U.S. is now the world's leading producer of natural gas, and we have a chance to, and I think we will, surpass Saudi Arabia as the world's largest oil producer by 2020. And while we should all support a diverse and balanced energy strategy, including renewables and energy efficiency, unfortunately the President's 2014 budget for the Department of Energy ignores a number of new energy plans in the landscape. The President's energy budget doubles down on some failed policies of the last 4 years, continuing to risk taxpayer dollars on green energy programs that have proven costly, ineffective, and failed to deliver on the jobs that were promised. Notably, the President calls for a $2.8 billion for the DOE's Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, a 56% increase over prior years. The amount is nearly double the budgets of the Office of Nuclear Energy, Fossil Energy, and Electricity combined. Such a disparity in funding levels conflicts with the President's stated commitment on an all-of-the-above energy strategy. The President's energy budget isn't just about dollars and cents, it's also about priorities for the country. And the priorities set forth in his budget are a little bit out of touch with today's energy reality and present a stark contrast from the energy priorities being pursued by this committee. Our vision for the nation's energy future is a true, open, all-of-the-above strategy that would promote greater production and use of our new energy abundance, facilitate private sector innovation to develop advanced energy technologies and manufacturing, and ensure that U.S. consumers indeed have a long-term supply of reliable and affordable energy. It should also include a global perspective on how North America's abundant resources can be used to launch strategic international diplomacy and geopolitical stability around the world. To achieve those objectives, I believe that it is time to repurpose the Department of Energy to reflect the opportunities of today and meet the challenges of tomorrow, and I'm very happy to see the Secretary's testimony reflect these new ideas in both organizational changes as well as the overall mission. Our transforming energy landscape requires a DOE for the 21st century. We need an agency that is ready to shed its culture of scarcity and instead embrace a mindset of abundance and opportunity. We need a department that will take full advantage of our newly discovered energy resources and capitalize on private sector expertise to modernize our energy systems. And that includes continued oversight regarding U.S. export policies that impede U.S. participation in international energy projects and commerce. Not true just for LNG and coal, but for nuclear suppliers, equipment, and renewables as well. Such a transition, if done properly, will spur dramatic economic growth, create thousands of good American jobs, make us significantly more energy secure, and in fact set the U.S. down a path of becoming a global energy superpower. So, Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your appointment. We certainly look forward to working with you over the next couple of years to achieve our common objective, and I would yield the balance of my time to nobody. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, ranking member of the full committee, for a 5-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for being here today. The Department of Energy will benefit from your expertise and leadership, and we look forward to working with you and as the nation continues its transition to a clean energy economy. The Department has a host of challenging responsibilities, from cleaning up Cold War-era nuclear sites, maintaining our nuclear weapons stockpile, to managing 17 national labs and operating the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Running the Department of Energy is a big job, and you have the experience to do it. But I want to tell you how I view your role. I look at your responsibilities through the lens of climate change. Climate change is the biggest energy challenge we face. There is no debate about the science. Climate change is happening now. It's caused by humans, and the impacts are real. The paramount responsibility of the Secretary of Energy is advancing the nation's response to this existential threat. For decades, experts have talked about the potential future impacts from climate change. They've warned that in the future we'll face extreme heat waves, floods, droughts, wildfires, ocean acidification, and dramatic sea level rising. These are no longer future threats. They are happening today. Climate change is spawning extreme weather across the country, from the Texas droughts to the Colorado wildfires to Superstorm Sandy. And as the impacts mount, the window for effective action to address climate change is closing. Just this week, the International Energy Agency warned that unless the world acts to reduce carbon pollution before 2020, global temperatures could rise by more than 9 degrees Fahrenheit, which would, quote, be a disaster for all countries, end quote. IEA found that taking key actions now to reduce emissions could be done at no net economic cost, while delay would impose trillions of dollars in costs on society. Mr. Secretary, your job would be a lot easier with support from Congress, but don't count on it. This committee and the Republican-controlled House has become one of the last remaining refuges of the Flat Earth Society. We have the jurisdiction to do so much to protect future generations, yet we won't even hold a hearing to learn from the scientists about their concerns about climate change. So you will have to act without us. President Obama got it exactly right in his State of the Union address when he said that if Congress did not act, he would. Some of the most important authorities are those in the Department of Energy. You need to act aggressively to strengthen energy efficiency standards for appliances and equipment. That will save consumers money while reducing energy use and carbon pollution. You should implement the President's proposal for a race to the top on energy efficiency and grid modernization to encourage states to voluntarily adopt forward-leaning policies. And you can invest in research and development and provide other support for promising clean energy and energy storage technologies. Mr. Secretary, you also can play an important role in educating Congress and the public about the threat of climate change and the urgent need for action. We are at a critical crossroads. We face great peril if we ignore the science and cling to the fuels of the past. Or we can listen to the scientists, invest in the clean energy technologies of the future, and lead the world in energy innovations. Mr. Secretary, I'm confident you will help us choose the right path, and I look forward to your testimony and to working with you on all the issues that you confront where we can be of help. Yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. That concludes the opening statements. So, Secretary Moniz, we'll recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening statement and look forward to your testimony. And be sure and put the microphone on. Thank you.
Great. So, Chairman Upton and Whitfield, ranking members Waxman and Rush, members of the committee, I thank you for this chance to appear before you today to lay out some of my priorities and vision for the next few years at the Department of Energy. It's my first opportunity to appear in the House as Secretary of Energy, and I look forward and hope to use these brief remarks to at least partially introduce myself to the committee as a basis for our work going forward. I've been working on energy, science, and security issues for most of my professional career, and I think it's known I served as DOE Undersecretary during the Clinton administration after serving as Associate Director in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Most of my professional career has been at MIT, where I've been on the faculty since 1973, including serving as head of the Department of Physics and founding director of the MIT Energy Initiative in 2006. So today I'll lay out some of my vision for how the department can be best positioned to address the pressing challenges before us and touch on some of the initiatives in the President's fiscal year 2014 budget request for the Department of Energy. Now I'll organize some brief remarks around the DOE mission areas, starting with energy technology and policy. Well, since the President took office, it's been already said, in fact, by Chairman Upton, the global energy landscape has undergone a profound change. In the United States, oil and gas production has increased each year, while oil imports have fallen to a 20-year low. At the same time, renewable electricity generation has doubled, and carbon emissions have fallen to the lowest level in the United States in nearly 2 decades. But even with this increase in domestic oil and gas production, high gasoline prices impact American families and businesses every day and remind us that we are still too reliant on oil, and the risks of global climate change, as Mr. Waxman said, threaten the health, security, and prosperity of future generations. The President's FY14 budget request will help us double American energy productivity by 2030, save consumers and businesses money by saving energy, support groundbreaking research and innovation to leverage every domestic source of energy, from hydrocarbons to nuclear to solar and wind, and other renewables as well, like hydro and geothermal. The President's budget increases investments in DOE's applied energy programs. Among these are the energy innovation hubs, which bring together top scientists and engineers pursuing game-changing energy goals, and also the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, ARPA-E, supporting high-impact early-stage technologies on the way to the marketplace. And I very strongly support both of those programs. I also served on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and 2.5 years ago, that group recommended a new approach to trying to integrate various threads of energy policy, environment, security, economy, specifically by launching an administration-wide process termed the Quadrennial Energy Review, and I plan to work on that across the administration, but clearly also with input from the Congress, from the industry, from NGOs, and others. This will build on the Quadrennial Technology Review carried out in the Department in 2011, and to do this work, I feel it's very important that we beef up our analytical capabilities as the underpinnings of a fruitful discussion with all of the stakeholders. In science, DOE science programs really are a key part of the backbone of basic research in the physical sciences in the United States. Earlier this month, I took my first trip as Secretary. I went to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Among other things, I saw Titan, the world's fastest supercomputer. By pursuing the research necessary to enable and build the next generation of supercomputers, we can help ensure continued U.S. leadership in this area. But we certainly cannot be laid back about it. International competition, especially from China, is closing in quite rapidly. While I was at Oak Ridge, I also visited the first hub called Castle, applying these large-scale computational tools to nuclear power reactors. It's producing product already, a virtual environment for reactors. The President's budget also continues support for the Energy Frontier Research Centers, which have been, in my view, a great success at many universities and laboratories across the country. On nuclear security and environmental remediation, I'll be brief, although these are clearly very important missions for the Department. The President's budget proposes, I think, a strong basis for transitioning to a smaller but always safe, secure, and reliable nuclear stockpile. It also strengthens the science, technology, and engineering base to maintain that safety and reliability over the long term. Environmental remediation at the many sites involved in decades of nuclear weapons production during the Cold War remains a major mission for the Department. This is a legal and moral imperative, and the President's budget proposal provides resources to clean up this legacy and continue the world's largest environmental remediation effort in the Department. Next week, I will visit the Hanford site, where we have some of our most difficult challenges in trying to reach eventual closure of all of these sites. Finally, improving the management and performance of the Department really is one of my top priorities as Secretary. I believe we need to do this to enable our pursuit of mission effectively. And I'll just say I've identified now particularly 4 areas where I would like to focus attention on improved management and performance. One is better integration of our science and energy functions. Second, elevating the focus through organizational change on management and performance as an enterprise-wide requirement. Third, security. We need clearer lines of authority and responsibility, and we will pursue that organizationally. And finally, I've already mentioned beefing up the analytical capacity in the Department and our laboratories as part of our analyzing policy. So in summary, the Department of Energy, I think, does have very significant responsibilities that bear on America's economic, energy, environmental, and nuclear security future. I've appreciated the opportunity to collaborate with members of this committee and with other members of Congress, both in my previous tenure at DOE, some of you were here then, and in the years since, and I'm committed to working with Congress in search for solutions to this country's energy and nuclear security challenges. Mr. Chairman, I've submitted a longer statement for the record, and I look forward to your observations, suggestions, and questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate your comments, and we look forward to working with you as you move forward at the Department of Energy. I think today's opening statements reflected the divergent views here in the Congress about energy and its impact on economic growth and job promotion. Mr. Waxman talks about climate change, and I know that he genuinely is concerned about that issue, as we all are. And I think one of the key issues that many of us that are elected to represent over 700,000 people each is our economy has been very sluggish. We're trying to promote economic growth. We're trying to create jobs. We're trying to increase revenues for the government so we can do more programs. And many of my friends on the other side of the aisle, as I said, are very sincere in their views, and they would like to see us go right down the road that the European Union has gone down. And we know that the European Union has pursued a broad range of climate policies, including renewable energy subsidies for wind and solar power. They have a cap-and-trade system. But the results of this, it appears quite clearly, is not working. As I said, The Economist just a few months ago had a big article talking about Europe's energy policy delivers the worst of all possible worlds. And their gas prices are so high. You have companies leaving Europe. They closed all their nuclear power plants in Germany. They were backing away from coal, and now they're planning to build 69 new coal-powered plants in Europe. And then recently we had this article in the New York Times, high energy costs plaguing Europe. And they talk specifically about how the head of the European Power and Carbon at the energy consulting firm in Paris said, we embarked in Europe on a big transition to a low-carbon economy without taking into account the cost and without factoring in the competitive impact. And I know many of our friends on this side of the aisle view us as we're too far this way and we think they're too far that way. So we hope that you can help lead this country in a more balanced approach on energy. I'm a fan of the Sierra Club in that it's done a lot of good things for America in protecting our environment. But when the president of the Sierra Club says, we want to get to a place where we do not use any fossil fuels, and next week the Sierra Club is going to be in Louisville, Kentucky. They're going to be demonstrating and protesting against the use of coal. And I don't think anyone realistically can say that we can meet our electricity demands in this country and remain competitive without a strong fossil fuel presence. You can't build enough windmills and solar panels to meet that need. And I talked to you soon after your confirmation, and you were certainly not involved in it, but right across the line in Tennessee from my home state of Kentucky, Hemlock Corporation built a $1.4 billion plant to make some component parts for solar panels. And they said there were going to be 2,500 new jobs. There was government stimulus money in the project. And they announced in January, after they got up to 400 employees, that they were going to close the plant down. They were never even going to open the plant. So now they're down to 20 employees. They built a $20 million railroads line into that plant, and they're not going to move one product out of there. It's being closed down. So I think the challenge we face in this country is just having a balanced approach without someone saying, hey, we don't need fossil fuels at all. We know that I do believe what the President said. We need an all-of-the-above policy. But frequently, my view is that this administration says one thing and does another in that arena. Now, I meant to ask you some questions. I don't know how I got so worked up here, but one thing I'll just ask you quickly about on the Paducah plant. It is, hopefully it is the Department of Energy's policy to try to maintain the viability of that plant and protect the 1,200 jobs there. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do agree with that.
And you are going to consider requests for proposals or expressions of interest to continue to operate the plant?
Correct. In fact, if I may, I can even reflect on a little history in terms of the history with the Portsmouth plant, where USEC ceased operations there in 2000, and the plan, which I think is a good model going forward with Paducah, is that we can go into cleanup. That prepares the way for decommissioning, but in a parallel track, we look for new business opportunities to use the site, the people at the site, the resources at the site.
Okay. Thank you. My time has expired, and I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, as I stated in my opening remarks, it's a huge priority for me to ensure that all Americans, especially those who have been historically underrepresented in the energy field, have access to the employment, business, and economic opportunities that this industry provides. I stated in my talk that, in my previous statement, that I've had talks with various industry leaders on the issue of jobs from both the demand and the supply side. And they have spoke up, and they're very concerned with the fact that up to half of the current energy workforce in some sectors will need to be replaced due to retirements and attrition over the next 5 to 10 years. And in order to replace these workers, energy workers, the industry leaders are beginning to recognize that minorities and other historically underrepresented groups will need to be called upon to help fill these jobs. So we must therefore be proactive in ensuring that future workers are being trained with the necessary skills. Are you, Mr. Secretary, confident in your capacity and your programmatic thrust? Are you confident that that your department have the resources, including the budget, the staff, the authority to effectively engage minority communities and help them enter into all aspects of the energy sector by helping them to gain access to training, STEM education, jobs, and other business opportunities? Is there anything that your department needs from the members of Congress to make sure that they assist you in your proactivity in terms of your outreach to minorities?
Congressman Rush, thank you for the question. I think you raise a really important issue. As you say, the energy industry, I think, is booming, and I think it has every indication that it will in the future, from fossil fuel production to hopefully our leadership role in producing advanced technologies for the future. If you look at the demographics of our country and where they are heading, we will need to draw upon all of our people, women, minorities who have not yet played a sufficient role. So I think this is a place that I'd really like to work with you on this. I might note that there has been recently at the White House there was a focus on women in clean energy. Perhaps we could talk about doing some similar things with underrepresented minorities in that regard. I think we should focus on also what we do with small and minority businesses. Mm-hmm. We do have a program there. What I will do is I will go back and scrub where we are in terms of resources and authorities. And after I understand that, I'd like to come back to you to discuss some specifics of what we might do.
Mr. Secretary, I look forward to our discussions and our working together. I would like to just talk to you, ask you a question about the impact of sequestration. Sequestration is harming our competitiveness in the race to see which country will lead the clean energy economy. Your department has an important role. The ARPA-E has had several major technological achievements and commercial successes. Its technologies have attracted over $450 million in follow-on investment from private sector after receiving just $70 million of initial investment from ARPA-E. How will the funding cuts due to sequestration affect the ARPA-E and its mission to continue supporting research and development for breakthrough technologies?
Well, sir, clearly the sequestration has had an impact. I believe the impact is about $1.9 billion across the department, across all the missions. And as of today, we are at about 1,500 workers laid off or with substantial furloughs. This obviously is affecting our work. I want to thank the Congress for working with us in some reprogramming, which has ameliorated the effects in various sites, but clearly we cannot avoid those impacts. So it's everything from putting at risk milestones in some of our cleanup projects to diminished research capacity in programs like ARPA-E.
Gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary, welcome. You're no stranger to the committee, and certainly in the past you've been a very forthcoming witness and decent representative for the administration, so we look forward to working with you.
Is decent praise?
Decent is good. Decent is good. There are other D words that I could use that are not good, but decent is good. In your immediate position at MIT, you were an author or co-author of a study in which is entitled The Future of Natural Gas, and it recommended that the U.S. should not erect barriers to natural gas imports or exports. I share that. You're now the Secretary of Energy, and as Secretary of Energy, you're going to have some decision-making authority on whether to approve permits to export LNG to nations that do not have a free trade agreement with this country. There is a rebuttable presumption in the law that the Department of Energy should authorize the permit unless they can find that it is not in the national interest. There is apparently a finding document which, if it's public, I don't know that it's public. Could you enlighten the committee on the evaluation process you're using on these permits, and also enlighten us as to whether you still agree with the study recommendation that the U.S. should not erect barriers to natural gas imports or exports?
Thank you, Mr. Barton. And we have had many opportunities to talk before in the past. I should clarify one thing, and then I'll go directly to the answer. In terms of the study, I just want to emphasize that those statements were in a somewhat different context in terms of they were addressing the potential for imports in about 25 years. But fundamentally, I think as the guidance which you stated, that there is a presumption of approving licenses unless there is something that would jeopardize the public interest, I think reflects the kind of philosophy that you have just stated. So the question then becomes, how do we judge the public interest? And there, I think there's been a whole set of criteria put forward as guides. They're not statutory, but have been put forward by the department, and certainly these issues of balance of trade, of job creation, environmental considerations, energy security, domestic need, impacts on the economy are all part of that. Perhaps I can say where I am today. First of all, I'm 3 weeks.
So far, you're doing a good answer at not answering the question.
I'm
assuming that at some point in time there will be a pony in all of this that you're giving us, and we'll get an answer.
I'm 3 weeks and 2 days into the job.
You're learning quickly.
And I've said that I have been reviewing assiduously the processes used to date, and I'm intending to move now expeditiously into evaluating the license applications. That will be done case by case, go right through them with the order as has been stated by the department in terms of the filing requirement.
Now, I want to make sure in the remaining minute, when this study, this was when you were at MIT, the U.S. should not erect barriers to natural gas imports or exports. I am quoting that study correctly, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that we haven't abused you there.
No.
All right. You're now the Secretary of Energy. You have a different hat you have to wear. You did agree, though, that the presumption is that the the project should be approved unless you believe it is not in the public interest. Now, I think you agreed with that statement.
That was
You've
my
agreed
statement
with
as well.
that.
Right.
And you just did say that you're going to look at these in an expeditious fashion, which in my dictionary means as quickly as possible.
Correct.
So could you give us a time frame, the next 3 months, next 6 months? And I know you've got multiple projects, but would you be expecting to make some decisions in this calendar year? We don't want another Keystone
Absolutely.
Pipeline thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Perfect timing, 0 time.
All right, thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, you can play an important role in educating Congress and the public about the threat of climate change and the urgent need for action. There's no debate about the science. It indicates that climate change is happening now, and it's caused by humans, and the impacts are real. Mr. Secretary, you're an esteemed scientist. You were unanimously confirmed by the Senate. Can you take a moment and explain why it's important for us to act now to address climate change?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Waxman. Well, first of all, I certainly agree that it's indisputable that we are experiencing warming, and that the pattern of consequences that has long been expected, in fact, are appearing around us, unfortunately, typically at the higher end of the predicted ranges, whether it's melting ice, which is easily visible, to the issues I think that you raised earlier, be they storm intensities, droughts, wildfires. Now, clearly, this is a statistical result as opposed to something that applies to any one event. But the fact is the pattern is completely consistent with that expected for a long time, only unfortunately accelerating faster than we expected.
Does that mean we should do something now?
Yes, and the reason, a key reason, is that in particular, especially carbon dioxide, the principal greenhouse gas associated with energy supply, resides in the atmosphere for many, many centuries. So it is a cumulative impact, not something that we can kind of turn on and off very easily. And we are building up an irreversible momentum. So prudence suggests that I think we need to start talking about how we manage, still within the all-the-above energy philosophy, how we manage the transition to a low-carbon economy.
Our chairman and others have said that, look, U.S. carbon dioxide emissions are at their lowest level in 20 years. The implication is that no further action to address climate change is necessary. I don't believe that's the case. What matters is not whether U.S. emissions have declined. It's whether we're on track to decline in the future by the amount needed to prevent dangerous climate change. Mr. Secretary, are you aware of any reputable expert who believes we are currently on track to avoid dangerous climate change?
Well, certainly the overwhelming preponderance, I mean, nearly unanimous in the scientific community of relevance, certainly expects that we are on a pathway to very negative consequences.
That's a mild way of putting it. Look, we're told that the market's working, that we're doing more than our share in the United States. The Europeans and others aren't doing nearly as much. And I just wanted to cite for you some information that I think it's worth noting. This was all in a letter dated March 11, 2013, that Mr. Rush and I sent to Chairman Upton and Chairman Whitfield. We pointed out that European Union is committed to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions from its member states by 20% by 2020, compared with 1990 levels, and is on track to meet this target. The European Union is pledged to achieve even more reductions if the United States and other developed countries would agree to do more. The President pledged we're when he was in Copenhagen in 2009, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 17% below 2005 levels by 2020. This is the equivalent to a reduction of just 3% compared to 1990 levels. Several European countries outside the European Union have made more ambitious pledges than the U.S. Do you think we're the best in the world in reducing these emissions? You would think that recent carbon dioxide emission reductions in the U.S. is due to the marketplace. Now, it's certainly due to the fact that we're in a recession. It's due to the fact that we have more renewables. It's due to the fact that natural gas is playing a better role and that we're promoting renewable energy. Is that happening because of the marketplace or U.S. laws and policies?
Well, I think, as you said, I mean, it is a mixture of drivers. Certainly, the large increase in gas use for the electricity sector has been a market-driven approach. But of course, policies at the state and federal level have stimulated this. For example, this doubling of renewables only in the last 4 years. Which is a major advance. And
we need more policies to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy. Do you agree?
I think we need more technology and more policy to move towards the low carbon economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This time I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Scalise, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you having this hearing. And Mr. Secretary, welcome to our committee. Thank you for coming to testify before us and talk about some of the issues that we work on here in the Energy Subcommittee. I know over the years we've been pushing, a lot of us have been pushing for a true all-of-the-above energy strategy to open up more areas that are right now blocked for exploration in America, to try to greenlight projects like the Keystone Pipeline so that we can bring in more energy from a trusted partner and friend like Canada that gives us less reliance on some of these Middle Eastern countries who don't like us, help our trade imbalance, and just many other things that are needed to expedite the process of producing American energy, keeping agencies like EPA from trying to interfere with the hydraulic fracturing process that's been so successful and opened up so many of these some of these shale plays across the country that are not only creating a lot of American energy, but a lot of jobs, a really bright spot in our economy. Your predecessor in this position had made comments over the years that we should have gas prices at the levels of Europe, and really pushed for an energy policy that I think the President shared that actually has led to, I think, less American energy, made it harder for us to open up areas and do more exploration in America. I'm curious to see what your overall strategy is on energy in general, but also specifically things like gas prices, as families still pay over $3 a gallon right now, and with the summer approaching, likely to be paying higher. Do you have a plan to try to lower gas prices, to try to increase American energy, to try to keep the federal government from making it even harder to produce in this country than it is right now, and create those jobs? So I can just throw that out to you.
There are quite a few questions in there. First, again, I very much subscribe to the President's all-the-above strategy, and I think
we disagree with the President's definition of all of the above. It seems to be more focused on above and nothing below, which is not all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all due respect, I would say, the ground truth is, as we all know, that oil production is up dramatically. In fact, we had a little.
And I mean, I've actually had a conversation with the President about this, because he says that a lot. He says oil production, energy production's never been higher under his administration. When I pointed out to him, and in fact, on federal lands, it's actually dramatically down. On private lands, it's up. And so in the areas where the President has no control, it is up. But in the areas where he has had control, it's been down in many cases because of his policy. So I do think it's disingenuous for the administration to go out and say, and President himself, to say, since I've been President, energy production's never been higher, when in fact his policies on federal lands have actually reduced production. And that's a fact that the Energy Department has actually confirmed. And so, as you say that, you can say it because it's an accurate statement across the board to say it's higher, but on federal lands, energy production is down. in many cases because of the administration's policies. And that's why we disagree with this connotation of all of the above. I mean, you can't be for all of the above when you're saying no to Keystone, when you're making it harder to actually explore on federal lands for American energy. And so I hope you understand that distinction.
No, I understand. I'm trying to address it. I think the reality is it's a question of what choices are made by private companies, where they want to go to drill. There are many leases. This is a Department of Interior issue,
right?
Not Department of Energy, but there are many leases going unused on federal lands. The fact is, the industry is moving hard in producing more oil, moving hard in producing more gas. There are some infrastructure issues which will involve both state and federal permitting, but I mean, the ground truth is we are producing more oil, we're producing more gas, we are...
But do you recognize that where we're producing more gas, it's primarily on private land,
yes.
And on federal land,
these are
production's
facts.
lower?
These are facts, but all I'm saying
But as Secretary of Energy, though, would you encourage a change in that policy where we can actually open up some of those federal lands that are right now closed? I mean, so many areas of our federal lands across the country are closed to production where you've got very rich reserves. You know, we've been trying to get the administration to be in all of the above administration and open some of that up. Would you be open to kind of promoting that as Secretary of Energy, where you'd have a bully pulpit to push for that kind of increase in production on federal lands where it's down?
Again, we both understand that is a Department of Interior responsibility.
Right, but I mean, you're the Secretary of Energy. You have the President's ear on energy issues in general.
So in terms of where I am is supporting the idea that the country pursues what we call all the above. That is, we will continue to produce more oil, decrease our exports, help our balance of trade. The Department of Energy will be supporting that, certainly in trying to advance technologies for environmentally sound production. We want to work with our other sister agencies like DOI and EPA in terms of getting better data. There are issues such as methane emissions and beneficial reuse by the companies. I had a meeting this morning, in fact, which was very, very interesting in that regard. So I think we are totally supportive of this vision of pushing all the above.
I look forward to working with you on that. And we'll have more of this. I know I'm out of time.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. I know we'll have more of this conversation in the future. But thanks for coming. And congratulations
I'd be happy
on
to discuss that.
getting this new position. Look forward to working with you.
This time recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming today. It's a good thing to get to know you a little bit. I haven't been on the committee long enough to see your testimony before, so I appreciate your coming forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about fracking. We're going to be producing a lot of natural gas and oil using that technique, and that may be beneficial to the economy, but there's a significant risk, in my opinion, of natural gas escaping into the environment, which is a strong greenhouse gas, and potential for groundwater contamination, which is very important in California and many western states. I see a budget request of $17 million for research into the safety of fracking. Do you think that's going to be a sufficient amount to help guide us through this boom in the fracking that we're going to be seeing?
Well, of course, the $17 million request, I think is very important for getting engaged in this. But of course, there is a lot of work as well going on through industry. There is work going on in a cost-shared way using the Royalty Trust Fund. So I think the DOE component and also Interior and EPA. So the DOE component is one part. I think a key will be for us to make sure that we are kind of integrating what we support with that of what other agencies in the private sector are doing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And I would just add the methane emissions that you alluded to is something we clearly need to get our arms around. Yeah. Currently, the estimate is that about 2.5% of total greenhouse gas emissions in the United States is CO2 equivalent of methane emissions in fossil fuel production. So it's about 2.5%. But the data are not very good, number one. And number two, we believe there are many opportunities to capture and beneficially use that methane in the production.
Thank you. To change the subject a little bit, what do you think are the biggest barriers to financing clean energy projects today?
Oh, there are lots. I think the one issue is, or turning it around, is how can one mobilize a lot of private capital that's kind of on the sidelines today to come in terms of clean energy projects. This is something that I brought in some new people. We're trying to analyze these issues. But I'll give you as an example. It's very difficult to, in the renewable space, say distributed solar. You have a lot of small projects. You have nothing like what I would call the standard contracts as you have in the mortgage business, and therefore it's very difficult to aggregate them and be able to get access to the kinds of capital markets that one can in other parts of the energy industry. So these are the things we need to discuss, I think.
And you're going to be aggressively moving to finding solutions.
And we will, as part of this quadrennial energy review, we'll be working with Treasury and OMB and others, trying to see what are the right mechanisms to stimulate private capital coming into these markets more strongly.
Okay, well, I understand that the DOE has a stated goal of wind energy producing 20% of our electricity by the year 2020. Is that a realistic goal? Can we make that goal?
President's goal. President's goal.
Can we make that goal?
We're going to try. It's yeah.
So part of the barriers are financial barriers.
Yeah, we're about. I think right now I have to check this, but I think we're about halfway there. So we have to pick up the pace, and moving private capital in would be important for that.
And then moving on to electric vehicles, what are our barriers in terms of getting electric vehicles accepted in the marketplace? And
well, electric vehicles clearly have a lot of promise. In fact, the Tesla was, of course, it's an expensive vehicle, but Tesla was rated by Consumer Reports as the best car they ever tested. Not in that year, but ever. I mean, I think often what we forget is electric vehicles are very high-performance vehicles.
Right.
Now, clearly, the biggest barrier right now is getting the cost of the batteries down. Because if you want to have a long range on electric drive, you're talking today a battery that, is literally in the tens of thousands of dollars.
And there's some promising technology in the DOE in that area.
There's been about 40% drop in that cost in the last few years. We've got to keep driving down. The goal is to get to $100 to $200 per kilowatt of storage. Today we're in the $500-600 range.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Waxman has made the statement that, as I understood it, climate change is caused by people. And I like to agree with him sometimes, but the only closest I can get to that is it punishes people. It's punished taxpayers. It's punished taxpayers to the extent of $34 billion, and we haven't done anything yet. Nothing that alludes to getting the benefit of the money that the taxpayers have had to pay out. I don't think you disagree with that, do you?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hall. If you could clarify the question, I didn't quite understand it. I apologize.
It wasn't a question. It was a statement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That Mr. Waxman said climate change caused by people. And the Sierra Club, and I'm certainly not a fan of the Sierra Club. I want that to go on the record. I think they're an enemy of anybody that's 18 years old or over that needs a job or is looking for a job. But climate change has cost the people, not the people, but the taxpayers, $33 to $34 to $35 billion so far, and we've got very little out of that. How can you disagree with that?
Well, sir,
and what have we got out of it?
I'm sorry? Oh, okay. So, well, I would say first of all, as we said before, the United States, among industrialized countries, is unique in having decreased our CO2 emissions. But secondly, I think we've laid the foundation for a new technology enterprise in this country. And
you laid the foundation that nobody's following. Russia's not, Mexico's not, India's not. No one's helping us. They want us to clean the world. Are you not recommending that, are you?
well, I would be happy if we are
If
in a
we
position
could, I'd be happy to.
of exporting technologies to those countries.
Let me get to my real questions. New York Times earlier this year relating to power shortages in New England noted the importance to the region of being able to import power from the Indian Point nuclear facility, quoting one individual as saying, without Indian Point, New England would have been lost, or they said would have been toast. The situation in New England was due to an over-independence on gas. Would you agree this reflects why it's important to have fuel diversity?
Definitely.
All right. And in your view, do nuclear facilities play a critical role in ensuring the reliability of the grid?
Well, clearly, nuclear power is 20% of our electricity today, and it's a major component, and it's carbon free.
And did you know that Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you promised to review what's out there before approving any additional LNG export applications? I think Mr. Barton got into that a little bit. Let me ask you a little bit more. Can you update the committee on the progress of your review?
It's gone very well. Frankly, tomorrow I have perhaps the key summary meeting on the review, and also we have we've had the EIA look at how developments in the markets in the last few years might influence this. But I think, as I said to Mr. Barton, we're getting pretty much ready to start evaluating the dockets on a case-by-case basis.
At an event in Palo Alto this last week, President Obama reportedly said, quote, "We believe in a light touch when it comes to regulations." Would you characterize EPA's wave of new rules affecting the energy sector during the president's first term as a light touch?
Well, sir, again, I'm at the Department of Energy. We're not doing those regulations. I look forward to working with the EPA as appropriate in terms of providing analytical basis, technical advice. But it's clearly
and you should. You have a tough job. For one that's been working on energy science and security issues for most of your professional life, served on the MIT faculty beginning in 1973, included as head of the Department of Physics. You were the founding director of MIT Energy Initiative in 2006. That seems like that knowledge that you've gleaned there and that you've departed makes it pretty tough to you to agree with the person that appointed you.
Well, sir, I completely agree with the President in terms of, again, all the above energy approach, and I think the facts on the ground
Would you characterize EPA's wave of new rules affecting the energy sector during the President's first term as a light touch?
Again, I think the EPA is statutory.
And you agree with that, the way the EPA's handle their business?
That's not for me to judge.
But I'll just ask you one last question.
Gentleman's time has expired, Mr. Hall.
In that case, I'll yield back my time.
Okay, thank you. This time, recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And congratulations on your confirmation, Secretary Moniz. And thank you for your testimony. The Department of Energy has been doing great work in recent years, particularly in the development of renewable technologies. Basic research is obviously critical to developing these technologies, and I know you understand this coming from MIT. The FY 2014 budget clearly prioritizes this research, and I commend the administration for making a firm commitment to this critical work, even in these tough fiscal times. I'm fortunate to have two world-class research institutions in my district, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and UC Santa Barbara, that have benefited from DOE funding. For example, UCSB is one of DOE's frontier energy research centers and has produced numerous local spin-off companies. Just earlier this year, a Cal Poly research team received a DOE grant to further advance its research in reusing the wastewater used in the production of algae-based biofuels. This research project could produce technologies that could save Californians hundreds of millions of dollars in water recycling costs each year. These research dollars are creating tangible economic benefits in my district, and I'm sure there's quite a similar impact at other universities throughout the nation with their surrounding communities. Could you elaborate briefly on this? I want to ask you a couple more questions as well, but what are some of the other benefits, examples of DOE research dollars being turned into tangible benefits for taxpayers?
Thank you for the question. Well, those are two outstanding institutions, and as you say, actually, our great research universities across this country are really engines of innovation, particularly when they are embedded in a broader system of investors, et cetera. So if one just looks at ARPA-E as an example, there's been, we're getting close to about 300 projects which have been funded, and you take a subset, less than 20, you have a multiplier of like a factor of 5 in terms of private capital coming in to follow those investments. That's just one example of this multiplier effect.
Let me try another topic. I know you probably have several other examples you could cite immediately, but meeting our renewable energy needs is going to require more than just research. So many great ideas are developed in the lab, but never make it into the marketplace due to a lack of investment. The biggest issue I hear from these energy innovators in my district is the difficulty they have in bridging what they call the valley of death. What is DOE doing, if you're doing anything at all, to address this problem and help move more technologies out of the lab and the research institution out into that marketplace?
I might just add that many of them would say there are actually two valleys of death. They have to get through both of them to scale in the market. But I think, in particular, at the department, I would highlight 3 programs there. One is ARPA-E, as I already mentioned, which I think is developing a strong track record of getting things into the economy. Another, which I think will take a little more time to judge, but the energy innovation hubs. These are structured so that they can work on a specific problem, but anywhere across the innovation chain as it makes sense for that problem to move out into the marketplace. In California, there's one on sunlight to fuels, for example. And of course, a third has been the loan programs, for example, which started in the last administration, came in this administration, and have helped move some of the world's largest concentrated solar plant, for example, in California, is about to have first light.
Thank you. I do want to get one further question out on a technology, solar. There are so many roofs and parking lots in homes, businesses, nonprofits, government buildings that are perfect for solar, yet go unused because the owners can't afford the high cost of installation. I face this own challenge when I want to do something in my own private home in Santa Barbara. Thankfully, my county, Santa Barbara County, has a program that they call Empower SBC, Santa Barbara County, helps secure low-cost financing and rebates for homeowners that want to install solar and other energy-efficient programs. These programs are not very common yet. Is there anything you are doing to encourage the development of programs like Empower SBC, help make small and medium-scale solar more widely available?
Well, part of that, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of looking at how to move private capital off the sidelines, is that I think if we need to find ways of better aggregating small projects into ways with uniform contracting that can attract market capital into the game. That's one point. A second point is what I did not mention earlier, but I've emphasized in the department, that one of the kind of shifts in philosophy a little bit that I want to emphasize is much more work with states. I think states have been a center of innovation in advancing energy. One of the issues, however, is that we have enormous variability, and so we cannot do one size fits all.
Right.
I think we need to work with the states and then build up from the states to a more national position.
Thank you very much.
Time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. The administration's proposal budget cuts $46 million from the Office of Fossil Energy's carbon storage research line. This is down from $107 million it was funded at last year. This program funds research at the carbon sequestration project in Decatur, Illinois, which is already halfway to injecting 1 million metric tons of carbon. The University of Illinois, has a part of the Midwest Geological Sequestration Consortium, has great concerns these cuts will leave the research incomplete, compromising the 3-year monitoring phase, demonstrating the project's safety and viability. I have a letter here from the University of Illinois that goes into greater detail on the project, its progress and success to date, as well as recommendations for moving forward. And I'd ask Mr. Chairman for unanimous consent for the letter to be submitted for the record, and for you, Mr. Secretary, I'll provide you with a copy of that letter directed to you and your staff for review and consideration. So if I could do that, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
And then to my favorite topic, Mr. Secretary, as you are aware, the Circuit Court of the District of Columbia has a pending case before it with regard to whether the Nuclear Regulatory Commission must review the Yucca Mountain Repository License application mandated in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. If the court orders the NRC to resume the license review, will you honor the court's decision and support the NRC process?
We will follow the law, sir.
Good answer. This past April, I wish we were following it now. Well, that's the problem. This past April, Assistant Secretary Peter Lyons testified before the House Energy and Waters Appropriations Subcommittee that DOE currently has $18.5 million from Nuclear Waste Fund carried over or unspent from prior appropriations. Is that your understanding?
Sir, I'll have to explore that. I'm not aware of that specific number.
It's the similar question that I asked before, so I think your staff should be pretty well in agreement with that. So if you get back to us if that's the case.
Yes. Appears to be correct, I think.
Good answer. If the court rules and you find the DOE has insufficient funding to fully support the license review process, will you commit to prepare and submit a supplemental budget request this fiscal year if needed? Now remember, the court has ruled that they have to finish the study. You've got some money available. If you're going to comply with the law, if you need additional funds, would you then let us know what that would be?
I presume that would be the path forward.
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Are you aware of any technical or scientific issues that would prevent Yucca Mountain from being a safe repository?
Well, I think the answer to that question really would come out from a detailed look. To be straightforward, I'm on the record many years ago as pointing out that there are some issues in terms of, to be technical about, well, mildly technical about it, it's an oxidizing environment, and one would probably prefer a chemically reducing.
Well, and that's the importance of the final SEER report, which will make a judgment of whether it's safe for 1 million years or not, and that's what we await, and hopefully the court.
And obviously, that's what I said. That's an NRC decision ultimately to be taken, but there is that little scientific factoid.
DOE's document, Strategies for Management and Disposal of Used Nuclear Fuel and High-Level Radioactive Waste, issued on January 11th of this year, indicates legislation is needed to deploy that strategy. Why hasn't the administration sent legislation to Congress yet?
I believe the administration's position is that it will be working with the Congress to develop it, and I might say that I've personally been working with some senators on their draft, and I'd be happy to work with members in this chamber.
I would suggest, since we have a bicameral legislative body, and there's 2 chambers, it might be helpful if you have ideas on how to move forward, that you would come and talk to us.
I was asked to come and join the discussion. I'd be most delighted to accept an invitation here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and with that, I'll yield back my time.
Thank you. Thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Secretary Beniz, on your appointment and confirmation. You'll bring a fresh perspective to the department, so good luck to you. Look forward to working with you. I want to bring to your attention an important issue relating to the economic well-being of our country, particularly jobs in American shipping, our ports, and related businesses. It involves the Jones Act. and the excessive numbers of waivers that the administration and the Department of Energy have granted to that important federal law. Mr. Secretary, the Jones Act requires that cargo that is shipped between U.S. ports, domestic ports, be transported on American vessels. The law is vital to our nation's economic and national security because it supports the core maritime industries of our country, American shipbuilding and American jobs. In 2011, when the administration tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and at a few other times, the administration agreed to almost 50 waivers of the Jones Act. This is more than all in American history combined, and it was excessive. The law says that in order to grant a waiver, there must be a national security emergency, and domestic carriers must not be available. They must be unavailable. At that time, that was the time of the Libyan conflict, and I guess the powers that be decided that it was more important to get that oil delivered. But it was an excessively high number of waivers. It took jobs from American maritime industries, American cargo vessels. The work went instead to foreign shippers, and I just think this is very poor public policy, particularly at a time when we had a high unemployment rate. The only ones that really benefited at that time were the oil speculators and foreign oil companies and foreign shippers. So I wanted to ask you at the outset of your service, can you assure me that you and the department will stand by American workers and American businesses, support the Jones Act and the related American jobs in U.S. maritime industries, and look very skeptically upon further waiver requests?
Well, certainly supporting American jobs is one of our, obviously, our key objectives, and so we're totally committed to that. On this particular issue, I was not aware of these particular waivers, but I can assure you that the extent to which I'm involved in that discussion, and I'm not entirely sure at the moment, that we clearly will follow the law and the guidance in terms of only emergency waivers of the Jones Act.
I appreciate that, and I thought that might be the case, and just wanted to bring that to your attention at the outset of your service as Secretary. On another topic, as we look at all of the various sources of energy to power America, it seems like the one big area that's out there that is clean, that would save consumers money, is in energy efficiency. And I don't think that we have done enough to unlock the power of consumers to implement smart technologies, to get to be able to pick up their smartphones and change their thermostats, to do things on set-box tops on cable. I think that technology is changing quickly, and I think there are significant energy savings. It seems like the entire business model for electric utilities is outdated now. We should be looking at incentives for them to promote conservation to a greater extent. What are your priorities? What do you see in the future? What do you think the Congress should be focused on to move in that direction?
Thank you. First of all, I think immediately after I was sworn in, within 2 hours, I was speaking at an efficiency meeting, which was symbolic in a certain sense of the very high priority I attach to this. And this will be a major focus area. For the department, there are several threads, and I'd be happy to come and discuss this in more detail. Of course, one is that the department does have the appliance, for example, appliance efficiency standards responsibilities. Frankly, we need to accelerate getting a number of those out, which are in various stages of review in the department and in OMB. Number two, I think we need to really advance the enablers, and I think you already alluded to it, particularly the integration of information technology, smart grids, controls, sensors, consumer choice. So that's a second. And third, I would say this is very much in the line of the emphasis I want to give on working with states, because, for example, you mentioned utilities, and we need to talk about the utility of the future, which is not the same thing as the future of the utility, because there may be very many different services involved in the utility of the future. But the regulatory structures are very different in different states, and so the programs, again, cannot be a one-size-fits-all, but I think we need to work with the states in providing assistance in moving in the direction that you outlined.
Gentlelady's time's expired. This time I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome to our humble little committee. Appreciate you being here today. Look forward to lively exchanges with you during your tenure. This year, in December, will mark the 60th anniversary of when President Eisenhower went before the United Nations and gave his very famous Atoms for Peace speech. The United States Congress, the following year, took up that concept and passed the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 and declared that we should use atomic energy to make the maximum contribution to the general welfare. One of the purposes of the act was to provide for, quoting here, a program of international cooperation to promote the common defense and security and to make available to cooperating nations the benefits of peaceful applications of atomic energy as widely as expanding technology and the considerations for the common defense will permit, close quote. So in light of the challenges that we have in developing domestic nuclear energy, would you agree that nuclear exports can help maintain a sustainable commercial nuclear infrastructure in the United States?
Certainly, and in addition, support our non-proliferation aims.
Correct, which was part of the intent of President Eisenhower's appearance at the United Nations that day. So as a committee, can we look forward to you working with us to explore and examine ways to increase the United States' competitiveness in the nuclear trade?
Yes, indeed. And I might add also, if I may, sir, that Deputy Secretary Poneman has also been very, very committed to this same issue.
Very well. One element of the atomic energy mission involves the Department's role in the export of nuclear technology. Probably preceding your tenure by just a little bit, in March, the committee wrote the Department of Energy for detailed information concerning how the department implements its nuclear technology export reviews. The response from the department was received last week. Probably was not adequate, and I think your staff is aware of the committee's feelings on that. So, as a committee, can we count on you providing a more robust response to our requests on this important issue?
Okay, I will certainly look into that and get back to you, sir. Yep.
I have copies of our original letter and the response, and Mr. Chairman, I'll ask unanimous consent to enter these in the record.
Without objection.
We'll make them available to you before you leave today.
Thank you.
And then one important benefit of increased United States nuclear exports is to ensure that the United States know-how on safety and security is implemented worldwide. Will you help us by taking a close look at the department's and the National Nuclear Security Agency's current activity regarding export controls to ensure the process continues to work for the benefit of the United States?
I'd be happy to work with you on that. It's an important issue, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I thank you for your responses to those questions. I had a question on the actual line item of the budget that we received. I guess it was referred to as the highlights, and under the section dealing with fossil energy. And I apologize for not having turned to it earlier, so I would have the page number for you. But you look down the line, all the numbers are negative in the. Oops, sorry, that's renewable energy. Let's just skip ahead, shall we? Fossil energy, page 33. If you look at the line items there, fiscal 2014 versus fiscal 2012. For fiscal 2014, all of the numbers are negative and substantially negative, and yet the total fossil research, energy, and development is reported to be plus $83 million. I guess the line item that confuses me on that page is the line that says adjustments. About halfway in the page under total fossil energy, the last line item that's entered in there is a line that says adjustments. Can you tell me what adjustments is referring to? Or if not, can you possibly get back to us and let us know what that represents?
Mm-hmm. I think I'd better get back to you on that and not give an incorrect answer. So we'll do that promptly. Sure. I do want to note that, of course, there is in addition to what's here, there was the several $1 billion already put into the currently going carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration demonstration project. So that's not captured here in this budget.
Very well. And just to note, I appreciate your comments on the fracking issue, the fact that it can be done environmentally in a safe manner. The United States should be the leader in developing that technology, and indeed we should be exporters of that technology to other places in the world. And I thank you for that.
Gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, congratulations. Thank you. It's great to have you here before the subcommittee. I represent a district in New York, in the capital region of New York, which has incorporated much wind opportunity into the state's supply of energy. Can you give us an overview of what the Department of Energy is doing to spur the ongoing development of advanced wind energy?
Well, there are, I would say, two major directions. One is on the technology side. There's, for example, a focus on helping stimulate the technology for effective use of lower wind speeds, which would greatly increase the deployment possibilities. And another one is to basically try to drive down the costs of offshore wind, where, of course, you have a great resource, but it's a difficult environment to work in. So that's on the technology side. And the other dimension, I would say, is some of the loan and assistance projects have helped deploy substantial amounts of wind and solar.
Thank you. And I've had legislation that will deal with efficiency in terms of wind turbines and their assembly, how they're manufactured, how they're placed in order to get the maximum for the investment. Not only are we using more and more wind power, I'm told we're building more of it right here in the U.S. The wind components such as turbines and towers, blades, gears are increasingly being built by United States manufacturers. My understanding is that the percentage of wind components that are domestically manufactured has doubled from 35% in 2005 to 70% today. Do you find that accurate?
I don't know the precise numbers, but I do know the trend is in that way. And by the way, in addition, wind, I believe, was the largest capacity addition over the last year in the American system.
Okay. And is DOE's wind program on target to reduce the average cost of utility-scale onshore wind power to around 5 cents per kilowatt hour by, I believe it was the year 2020?
Yes, I think, of course, it depends upon the location, et cetera, but we are, in good wind locations, the costs are dropping dramatically. 5 cents is a very reasonable expectation. Of course, there is the other issue of sometimes those good wind locations are far away from the load center, and we have to solve the transmission problem.
Right. And what about the interconnect systems, too? Because I'm told that much of the capacity for wind, especially wind, perhaps solar, we have interconnect situations that are still of major concern.
Well, you mean in terms of the transmission?
The transmission or the actual technology that needs to be perhaps better developed or more high-tech in nature?
Well, I'm not certain of that, sir, but what is an issue potentially is that one might want to go, for example, if you have remote high-quality wind farms, you might want to go to high-voltage direct current lines, and for that, technology in terms of the power electronics is very important because with DC, it's the ends that kill you. Right.
Absolutely. Now, you somewhat alluded to this, Mr. Secretary, in that there are some barriers out there, long distances by which to get wind over to the source that's required. What is the department doing to address those barriers to widespread wind development?
Well, again, on the technology side, a key issue is large-scale storage. For example, the department has just has supported some very interesting work in terms of low-cost, efficient compressed air storage. So if we can have storage that meets the scale of intermittent resources, then you have the opportunity to dispatch it, and you solve that problem. In the nearer term, until those costs come down, I think we have a lot more to do, and NREL in particular is looking at the integration of natural gas and renewables. That's another way to balance the load-serving function.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the storage issue, what are the best hopes there for the development of battery types that will store incremental type powers?
Well, it's not only batteries. I mean, in fact, today, if you're in the right place, for example, in the TVA service territory, they have some very good pumped hydro as a way of storage. In general, hydro is a very good way of balancing renewables. There are more far out things. ARPA-E funded a so-called liquid metal battery, a whole different architecture. There is compressed air. There are flywheels. So all of these technologies are being pushed. A lot of them are materials problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
This time I recognize the gentleman, Mr. Terry from the state of Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, Ms. Moniz. Appreciate you being here. You have an impressive resume, and you're doing a good job today.
Thank you.
I have focused on natural gas, and I appreciate as an energy transportation fuel. And I appreciated your comment in your written statement that domestic natural gas production over the past 5 years has helped contribute to market-led reductions in carbon dioxide emissions, as well as the expansion of manufacturing and associated jobs. We've actually held a hearing that I chair in the Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade Subcommittee about the, especially in the steel industry, the importance of natural gas. And Ed and I are going to do one, I think, next week on other manufacturing areas as a combined hearing. So I appreciate your comments and support, particularly for the manufacturing. But my questions are going to focus more on the transportation side. Would the same hold true if more semis and straight trucks and large fleets were to change from diesel or gasoline to natural gas? Would we see reductions in CO2 emissions?
Yes. So if we convert gas to liquid fuels, typically we do not see a reduction. But if we directly use the gas, then we can have a reduction.
So you're saying compressed versus liquid would have a benefit?
No, liquefied natural gas is fine, or compressed natural gas. No, but I mean, if we do, the other direction is to convert gas to a liquid fuel, to convert it to a liquid fuel. That does not give typically any cost benefit. But CNG or LNG will have a benefit as long as methane leakage is controlled. So
at the pump site or at the site of production, as you had mentioned, talked about with McNerney?
If you use LNG for your Class 8 truck, you're going to have some boil-off. And so the question is how you control for safety reasons. And so the question is, it's a quantitative issue. But the potential is there to save carbon.
That's part of our intent as well as not importing OPEC fuel or oil. So it then concerns me a little bit when I see this $17 million set aside for natural gas technologies, and we have $356 million in batteries and electric vehicles is actually $575 million. So there seems to be a real disparity, a gap between natural gas technologies and battery technologies, electric vehicles. So the first thing that pops into my mind is the DOE implementing the Sierra Club's Beyond Natural Gas campaign in any way.
No, sir. I think the point is that the research funding is for technologies of tomorrow. I think in terms of natural gas vehicles, the technology is largely here. There is research also in ARPA-E, I believe, in terms of getting new materials for better storage tanks so that you can put more in, because
so there is DOE funding on the tank side.
Correct.
And is that part of the $17 million?
I think that may be an ARPA-E, but I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
I'll clarify that for you.
So when you from the cynical side, when we see such a gap between the funding, we're assuming, or there's a legitimate logical conclusion that there's not much interest in natural gas.
See, I think the issues are, for example, if you take the LNG trucks, the Class A trucks, I mean, there are trucks out there now with using LNG.
Yes.
In many ways, the issue is the OEMs to try to get the capital cost difference. A Class 8 truck capital.
Oh, I know. I'm well aware of the cost, and that's one of the barriers.
Yeah, and then it's the infrastructure.
And that's coming, despite our best efforts.
Yeah, the open road use is very difficult, but I think the market is going to be station to station.
And I have so many other questions on that, but in the last 8 seconds, have you formed a position on Keystone Pipeline in regard to your position from DOE?
That is a Department of State decision.
Well, other agencies have input, and DOE will be one of them.
We will make input certainly in technical analysis, but the decision is in Secretary Kerry's hands.
The gentleman's time has expired. This time, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
I think for my colleague from Nebraska, I think the Secretary has enough on his plate to pick a fight. But I appreciate you, and congratulations, Mr. Secretary, again. And I know we've met before, and in Texas, they would say, you know where I come from, but you know what the area I represent. So, and I appreciate to look forward to working with you. I would ask you some questions about LNG imports, but our exports, but our natural gas caucus is actually holding a briefing now with Chris Smith and bipartisan briefing. So I think that will handle a lot of the questions I have. Let me talk about something that has come up over the years. Carbon capture and storage is consistently discussed in context of its use possibly as carbon control technology under EPA rules on utilities and refiners. The problem is it's still too expensive commercially to be used. And I asked DOE this question every budget hearing so I could continue to monitor the progress. Can you please describe current DOE CCS activities?
Yes. Well, we have about a half dozen now major projects going forward. Some are power plants. Some are industrial facilities. For example, a large ethanol plant of Archer Daniels Midland plant. And many of them, I think the majority of them actually, also it's what's called CCUS, utilization and sequestration, specifically utilizing it for enhanced oil recovery. So today, I think a story not well known is that today we are using about 60 million tons per year of CO2 to produce 300,000 barrels a day of oil from enhanced recovery. And the estimate made, a Department of Energy study a few years ago estimated that could go up by a factor of 10. So 3 million barrels a day is getting pretty serious.
Yeah.
And to do that,
that's 2 more than we could ever get from the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah. And to do that, we would need to use CO2 from power plants or industrial facilities. There's not enough natural CO2 for that scale.
Okay. And is there any idea when CCS may be commercially viable? I know these plants wouldn't be there where they are now without the assistance of the Department of Energy.
Right. I think this is a case where government funding is the only way to get to the demonstration phase. The goal is to demonstrate it at the level where the regulatory requirements can be settled such that the private sector knows what the game is. But of course, that will only come as well when carbon emissions are being limited, and or we have enough use of the CO2, like enhanced oil recovery or other applications.
Okay. Okay. I'm a strong supporter of smart grid technology. I notice that the administration is recommending a 37.9% decrease in smart grid funding. Is that because we're moving these activities elsewhere, or are they truly reducing the activities for smart grid?
No, our intention is to increase the focus on smart grid. So I'll clarify, Mr. Green, that budget issue for you.
Okay. In the President's budget for FY14, budget request for ARPA-E is $379 million, an increase of 38% above enacted levels. You mentioned one of the strategic areas that funding will go toward is providing greater reliability and security in delivery of electricity. Electric reliability is a priority of mine, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate on some of the projects that may or what projects are going on within this space.
There's a whole bunch of projects. Some of them are very much in the technology development area. I mentioned earlier power electronics. That's a new focus area, which is a critical component of that. Another different cut on it is we are, of course, cybersecurity is you can't forget cybersecurity very long when you're talking about the grid and the smart grid
and reliability, and I understand.
And that's a huge focus. Another area is the proposed race to the top, which is for both energy efficiency and grids, where states will come forward.
I only have about 19 seconds. Do you have flexibility with current revenue funds for that race to the top?
No, that is a proposal to the Congress in the FY14 budget.
Okay, but you don't have the current funds. You can't put current funds toward this, and this will not happen without those additional funds.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This time I recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, thanks very much for being with us today. It's good to have you before us. And I think you've heard a wide range of questions from members on both sides of the aisle. And if I could, maybe just to kind of reiterate just a little bit here, to kind of give you background, you know, I think that everyone has always, we talk a lot about all of the above energy policy, and I know it was in 2008 that the Republicans put forward our plan for an all of the above energy policy, and that's really going through, you know, everything that we have today that you've been hearing, from nuclear to clean coal to oil to natural gas to hydro and all the alternatives. And we want to make sure that those are being used. And at the same time, you know, I look at my district. I represent a manufacturing district with 60,000 jobs. I also represent the largest ag district in the state of Ohio. And so it comes down to, we use a lot of energy in my neck of the woods. And so when we use energy, we talk about base load capacity, because when those factories are running 3 shifts a day, they've got to make sure that they have that energy straight through the day. And at the same time, you know, to get that energy, we have to make sure that we have that ability. And on the front page, I think it was today's Wall Street Journal, there was a report showing that, you know, we have about 1 million barrels more of oil being produced in this country every day, which is very, very important because, again, we want to get our reliance off of foreign countries out there. And I think the last number I saw, we were importing about 42% of the oil that we're using every day into the country. So, you know, when you look at what's happening out there, and it's great that what we're doing in production here in the United States, and I think that Dr. Burgess had asked a little bit about it, but really what's really helped us get there is on the means that we're using to bring this oil and natural gas up, and it's an old technology, which is fracking. And there was reports, of several weeks back of OPEC countries some of them are getting into a panic, and they're saying it's all because of fracking that's going on in the United States that's bringing up our ability to bring up this oil and to really get this into the United States market. Could I just ask you again, what is your stand on fracking?
Well, I'm not sure it's a stand, but what my view is that, as we've said, that I would say all of the environmental issues that have arisen, I believe, are manageable. I think we know what to do. They may be challenging in some cases, but we know what to do. The issue is doing it. And there, of course, it has not been, we've have had obviously incidents. The biggest problem, as an example, the biggest problem in terms of number of incidents has been, frankly, just poor well completion, bad cement jobs. Again, you know what to do in principle, but you just got to have best practices done all the time. Another example, which is slightly more challenging to address, but again, I think we know what to do, is methane emissions. Now, we are moving more than half, I believe now, of the frac jobs are so-called green completions, where the methane is captured and is for economic benefit. In fact, if I may just add one more, just this morning I was speaking with someone from a company where it's interesting. They are capturing the methane in the frac job, not using 30,000 horsepower diesel engines anymore to drive the hydraulic fracturing, but using gas-fired engines, and that then in turn is greatly improving air quality issues by displacing the diesels. So I think there are solutions there. We just have to make sure we are using them.
Okay. And just in my last 40 seconds here, another issue that is a real concern out there is on cybersecurity. And I know I've had several events in my district on cyber, and it's a big issue out there. But one of the questions is that, when we're looking at really protecting the grid out there, can you justify right now, and I'm looking at your budget numbers here, that cybersecurity for the electric grid would be only about $38 million is what you're asking, what your department's asking for, and shouldn't there be more dollars out there to make sure that the grid's protected?
Well, the cybersecurity activity in the budget actually appears in many different places in the department, and I'm putting together. I have pulled together a council, bringing together the various entities. So the Office of Electricity has a cybersecurity budget. The Office of Intelligence, the NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration, has a big program on cybersecurity, and I'm forgetting one, but and the CIO, of course, is heavily involved. So what we're trying to do is to make sure we bring all these assets together to look at everything from grid reliability and resilience to, frankly, protecting our own national security secrets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired, and I yield back.
This time, recognize Ms. Matsui of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Moniz, for joining us today, and I congratulate you on your new position. I appreciate the Department of Energy's continued commitment to clean energy, technology, energy efficiency, and the reduction of carbon emissions. The American manufacturing sector has an essential role when it comes to U.S. competitiveness. It accounts for 12% of GDP, 70% of private sector R&D investment, and 60% of exports. And the manufacturing sector added 500,000 jobs in the past 3 years. The President has emphasized the importance of investing in American manufacturing to build on this momentum. My district of Sacramento boasts nearly 14,000 clean energy, clean technology jobs, and more than 230 clean technology firms. I'm keenly interested in advancing our clean energy manufacturing sector and have introduced legislation that would assist these companies in exporting these products abroad, thus allowing them to create jobs and better compete in the global market. Mr. Secretary, the Energy Department's Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative is focused on improving the manufacturing of clean energy products and increasing manufacturing energy productivity more broadly. Why is this initiative important, and what benefits are we going to see?
Well, I think the initiative is important frankly, for the reasons that you have already stated, that this is the way of getting the next cutting-edge technologies moved into the manufacturing environment in this country, so we can capture those immediate jobs. But then we should not forget the spillover in the sense of capturing important parts of the supply chain that supply chains like to go together, and so you have a multiplier effect. The project in Youngstown, Ohio, for example, on 3D manufacturing, or additive manufacturing, sometimes it's called, is a good example. This is a technology that's already penetrating in the manufacturing sphere, but it's only just a kind of a toe in the water. So that's a place where we've got to put that into our manufacturing environment quite solidly. The next one will be on some semiconductors. That's a FOA that's out there right now. So again, I think it's we really need to think about, in the end, we need to capture the high margin parts of the supply chains of clean technologies.
Okay. This market is going to be worth trillions of dollars in the next decade. What needs to happen for the United States to lead in this market?
Well, I think of course much of this will happen in the private sector, but I think the federal government does have a role, as we just described. This is a good example in the manufacturing initiative. But I would go back to what may be even more important, and that is developing our human capital. I mean, this is absolutely essential. And in fact, one of the things that I would like to perhaps at some point, when I think about it more, talk with members of this committee and others in the Congress, is I think at the Department of Energy, we should maybe think about doing traineeships that focus right in on the key parts of energy technologies, energy activities, where perhaps we're not producing enough young people. And to go back to Congressman Rush's point, and making sure we're drawing upon the entire range of our human capital there.
Okay, well, that's good. To compete in the, well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about ARPA-E. Can you tell us about the work ARPA-E is doing to invest in potentially breakthrough technologies and attract private capital to support the development of these technologies?
So ARPA-E is, I think, was a wonderful initiative, and really credit Secretary Chu for pushing that, both before he was Secretary in a report of the National Academy, and then as Secretary. I think the ARPA-E has, in many ways, I think it's the face of innovation of the Department of Energy. It does business in a different way. It's targeting specific areas. For example, going forward, there'll be a much bigger focus on advanced transportation options coming forward, and soliciting ideas that sometimes are a little bit out there, pretty risky. I think we'll have to judge ultimately some years down the road whether these technologies scale up to be major marketplace players. But every indicator is extremely encouraging. Certainly lots and lots of patents, disclosures, startup companies coming out of it. I will note, we shouldn't forget, I think, if you go back to the very first request for proposals or concept papers, there were more than 3,000 concept papers put in for 37 awards. I do not think we are tapping our full capacity to innovate in this country. We need to do more of it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. At this time, I recognize Mr. McKinley from West Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, earlier in the remarks, Chairman Whitfield noted about your predecessor and his aversion to fossil fuels. Very clear, and he made that throughout the 4 years he was there, making that clear with it. it manifested itself in the budget with increasing monies being spent on renewable energies sources on R&D, but a decrease in fossil energy R&D. So I've got a chart that shows that what happened in the time preceding his administration, and then in the last, you see the direction we've gone in fossil fuel research. So I'm just concerned with that. Not only the direction, but also because I found I'm trying to reconcile the information that your office apparently had provided from your predecessor, and that was over the $421 million is indicated there at the end. It says that's a 24.8% increase. Mr. Secretary, just saying so doesn't mean it. So I'm trying to understand if your office can get back to explain why they think that's a 24% increase, when in reality you can see that it's a fairly significant decrease in funding for the National Energy Technology Laboratory. I'm sure that Mr. Doyle and Murphy and all those of us that have an interest in those facilities, that we don't see that money cut any further. So my point here with this a little bit is that during your Senate confirmation, you said you were, and there were statements to that effect and newspaper articles, how you're supporting the CCS research and R&D. And I applaud you for that, because we need to have that. I'm a little concerned whether you'll be able to carry that out if we continue to have a lessening amount of money in the R&D with Nettle. So the question that I would ask is, are you supporting the President's proposed decrease in funding for Nettle? Or will you make an effort to alter or work with us to alter it so that we can get that money back up to a more reasonable level?
First of all, I think there is, again, I think not shown on this graph is the $3+ billion of Recovery Act funding that's already been put out there for the CCS projects. So that's one.
This all came from the Congressional Research Service.
Yeah, but I think that's separate. So I think we need to look at the whole picture. The other thing is, and I just don't know from this picture, NETL also receives $12.5 million a year for research from the Royalty Trust Fund. Now, I think the bottom line is, however, that in my view, frankly, back in 1999, we were part of forming NETL from the previous FETC.
Okay.
And I think that NETL is our lead laboratory for fossil energy research.
Thank you.
And I work with...
If I could, and I appreciate you, we're going to have more of a discussion. But there were some other remarks earlier, and I want to maybe parse the words a little bit. You said it's indisputable that there is global temperature change. I don't know too many of us would disagree that there hasn't been some global temperature change. Mm-hmm. But my question that, do you agree with Congressman Waxman that it's primarily man-made, or is it natural and cyclical?
I believe, in my view, there's no question that a major component is anthropogenic.
Interesting.
And that comes from...
Is that from a consensus?
It is practically, I would say 98% of scientists involved in this area.
But you're aware of the petition process. If 32,000 scientists and physicists have disagreed that it's man-made. They say it's contributing. I think it'd be irresponsible to say we don't contribute. But is it primarily?
If I may say, and I'd be happy to come and have a longer discussion, but a few facts that first of all, the rise in CO2 emissions in the last half century is clearly tracked to our global increased energy use. Secondly, I know how to count. I can count how many CO2 molecules have gone out from fossil fuel combustion and I know how many additional CO2 molecules are in the atmosphere.
Let me just close with saying, in terms of consensus, I think consensus has a place in politics, but consensus doesn't have a place in science.
Again, sir, I just want to clarify. My judgment is based on numbers, on data, and not on the consensus. And I would be really delighted if we could have a discussion.
If we could have that, I'd like to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the member from Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary Moniz. And thank you for your testimony, and we look forward to working with you to implement your and the President's agenda for the department and the country. Some of my questions have been answered. I had some questions around weatherization because it's such an important program. It's helped low-income families for over 30 years now. And in 2012, the funding was at a historic low, but the President's request for 2014 really aims to ensure that the program can continue providing these important services, and that would be especially important for every place in the United States, but in my district, where we face energy costs of over 5 times the national average. You talked a bit about including job training. Is that included in the President's budgetary increase, or is that something that you're looking forward to doing? Because I think that's very important as well as, you know.
No, so this traineeship idea is one that I would like to start to work to develop.
Okay, and in determining the funding that goes to the states and the territories, I represent the Virgin Islands, so I'm a territory. We generally have a formula, but is the funding level ever influenced by need, or is it just a straight formula? And you may not know that at this point.
I believe at the moment we are locked into kind of a formula, but as you said also in the weatherization case, there was
weatherization I'm talking about.
Yeah, and weatherization, it's absolutely critical. If a continuing resolution would have that funded at $70 million, it got so low because of the Recovery Act funding, but it has to now come back up, and the request is for $184 in FY14. At $70 million, we could not sustain the program nationally.
Okay, and I'm asking because we have a letter into your office requesting an increase, even if just for a couple of years, because of our high energy costs. And then the other question I has to do with solar programs, and as you've said already, DOE is conducting a range of research, development, and demonstration and deployment activities for renewable sources. And could you tell me what tell us about the Sunshot Initiative? Did you speak about that already?
Well, no, I have not. But the Sunshot Initiative, we feel very good about in terms of where it's going. It is about it's about driving down the costs of solar, and I think and it's happening. The solar costs have dropped incredibly. The solar module cost is now somewhere around $1 per watt, and it wasn't long ago that was $2.50. So we are getting into a very interesting area.
You have a very ambitious goal of dropping to 6 cents per kilowatt by the end of the decade. You think you're on track for that?
I think we are on the technology. Then the question is, to get that, there will be a lot of requirements as well in terms of local regulations, how you install systems, because installation costs are now getting to be larger than the solar technology cost itself. So if we can, and I might say, in Germany, for example, their installation costs are about 40% of our costs through some uniform standards.
I've been interested in OTEC for quite a while. Is the department investing in research or that particular technology, the ocean thermal?
To be honest, I'm not sure where the department stands right now on that program.
I don't see a lot of. I have not noticed or seen anywhere where there's a lot of activity. But for a place like ours, small islands surrounded by ocean,
Yes.
with some deep water that can accommodate it. It would just seem like a renewable energy that we ought to pursue. And, you know, I hope that
I'll look at
in your tenure you'll take a look at it.
Okay, I will.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. The Department of Energy is fortunate to have somebody with your technical and scientific expertise. Personally, I'm excited to see the direction you take in regarding nuclear policy, considering your background. As we're all aware, your time is short in office, but the course that you take now has the potential to steer the department for years and decades to come. I hope you choose nuclear policy as one of your priorities. I'm concerned with the current direction of our nuclear energy policy, as nuclear is a reliable and clean source of massive amounts of energy, both domestically and through the world. In fact, in Illinois, 50% of our energy is from nuclear. With our infrastructure and experience, the U.S. should be the leader in the realm of nuclear know-how and operation, but our current nuclear energy strategy is unstructured and without clear goals. This lack of direction leaves our scientists and labs vulnerable when appropriators are looking for areas to cut. With the closure of a number of nuclear plants in just the past few months alone, I'm afraid the U.S. is going to see a vacuum of nuclear energy experts in the very near future. And as those individuals and their knowledge are snatched up by foreign competitors, there's no getting them back. An effective nuclear energy policy should look to use the best resources available to us in order to lead the world in this area. In your written testimony, you mentioned that our national labs have unique capabilities and expertise to provide technical assistance. I was happy to read this, as I also believe that our national labs, such as Argonne National Lab in my home state of Illinois, can play a key role in devising an enhanced nuclear energy security strategy. Collaborative partnerships among our national laboratories to develop such a strategy are going to be key to U.S. nuclear energy leadership in the future, and I hope that you'll look towards developing the unique capabilities of those labs as you look to improve innovation and effectiveness of the Department of Energy's energy programs. Just a few questions. A number of DOE national labs, Idaho, Oak Ridge, Savannah River, Argonne, have begun talks with one another in order to gain full advantage of their collective expertise in nuclear energy. Do you have any plans, or what are your plans, to help with this collaborative process moving forward in order to get the most out of what each of them has to offer?
Thank you. First, more generally than nuclear power, than nuclear energy specifically, I've met already with all the lab directors. We met down in Oak Ridge, actually, in my first week in office, basically, and so I am working with them to engage the laboratory leadership much more, what I would call, in a strategic partnership for the laboratory, for the department as to where we're going. The phrase I would use is, if you want people there on the landing, you should have them there on the takeoff. And so we're working to try to talk about what are the strategic technology directions that we are going. Among those is clearly nuclear, and you've named the labs that are leading it. Actually, others, Los Alamos also contributes, but clearly, well, Idaho and Argonne historically, and Oak Ridge were probably the three largest.
And what are your goals for the growth of nuclear energy overall? How do you believe the budget put forward by your agency can successfully accomplish all of those goals?
Well, I think in my view, the way I've always looked at it is our job is to make sure the marketplace in the end has the choices that it needs. Among those choices should be nuclear power. I think now there are several issues. One is, as you know, we have...
I got a couple more, so I'll just cut you off if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
We've done high-level comparisons with this administration's budget proposal for the Office of Nuclear Energy. What we found is a decline since 2010 of actually almost 28%. What's a little more striking is that during that time, DOE moved some additional line items into the nuclear energy budget that seemed to mask even a sharper decline. Given the environmental benefits of nuclear energy and its contribution to energy security, do you think such a decline is appropriate, or could it cause any problems? And will you commit to examine this apparent decline, knowing that you're new in this position, and respond to this committee with a full explanation of it?
I'd be happy to, and I've spoken with Pete Lyons. I'm committed to maintaining a healthy nuclear energy program. SMRs are an important direction, for example. Also, we should note there is the commitment at least made on the very, very large loan guarantee to help stimulate the construction of reactors in Georgia.
Wonderful. Thank you for your, and I yield back. And Chair recognizes Mr. Doyle for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome back for your inaugural visit in a different capacity, but we're happy you're here, and we look forward to working with you. I just want to get some clarity to some of the remarks that my friend Mr. McKinley made on CCS. The President's FY 2014 budget request for research related to CCS is $376.6 million, which is a decrease of 23% below the FY 2012 enacted levels. Now, I heard you make mention of stimulus money, some $3 billion, and I'm curious, that's back in, what, 2009. How much of that $3 billion has yet to be spent or is currently being, where does that, is that $3 billion gone?
No, it's not. I can't give you the exact number. I can get it for you later on. But in some cases, much of the funding has been expended. As an example, the industrial project, which I believe is in Illinois, is well along. On the other hand, another project in Illinois, actually, I think, the Future Gen, is still in the second phase prior to the major construction. And there, to be honest, and it's well known that we need to pick up the pace in order to have those funds expended prior to the end date for recovery funds.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how much still exists in the $3 billion. The other thing I'm just curious about, when you look at the sub-programs within CCS, in the carbon capture part of the sub-program, there's an increase of 62% in that budget from FY13. But in the storage sub-program, that's been decreased, almost been cut in half. I'm just curious why the increase in the monies going into capture and then the decrease in funding on the storage end. What's the result of that?
I think the reason is that I like to think about it as there's two fundamental problems. One is we need to demonstrate the storage with substantial injections over an extended period of time. That's what those recovery-funded projects are going to do, using conventional capture technology. But for power plants in the long term, we need the big cost driver is the capture technology. So the research is looking at the cost reduction of new capture technologies, while the big demonstration projects will address the storage side.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, over the past 10 years, my colleagues and I have been championing efforts to support the development and commercialization of fuel cell technologies to promote our U.S. energy independence. And in particular, I'm deeply committed to promoting the success of the Solid State Energy Conversion Alliance, SECA, under your fossil energy section. SECA is a successful partnership, as you know, between the government, academia, industry, and the national labs in developing solid oxide fuel cells that are capable of cleanly and efficiently utilizing our domestic energy resources, most notably natural gas, in the coming years. In fact, SECA has met or exceeded every benchmark that has been set for it by Congress and the DOE. Now, you've spoken of the importance of natural gas as a bridge to a cleaner energy future. Solid oxide fuel cells, such as those under development in SECA, are the cleanest, most efficient way to use natural gas, as well as a range of domestic energy sources. So in light of your support for natural gas, what are your plans for ensuring the continued success of the SECA program to ensure we develop technologies that make the most efficient use of that fuel?
To be honest, I'll have to go and look at that in detail, but I can make a few comments because I have not been briefed on this, to be honest, in the last 3 weeks. But one, I do know that certainly costs have come down, perhaps partly through SECA. I mean, 35% kind of cost reductions in the last few years. And secondly, I think also solid oxide fuel cells could be very interesting for combined heat and power applications because of their higher temperatures. So I will look into that and get back to you on the.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I wish you well, and I look forward to working with you. I yield back.
I do as well.
sorry, I was thinking about something else there for a moment. Your comments are so insightful that it makes me think about other things. Secretary.
Thank you.
Mr. Olson of Texas, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair and welcome Secretary Moniz. Congratulations on your nomination by the President to be the 13th Secretary of Energy, and by being confirmed by the Senate with an impressive 97-0 vote. Mr. Secretary, my home state of Texas is the fastest growing state in the Union. Texans want to sustain that growth, and they know that one of our challenges is reliable power being available. Federal and state regulators agree that we could see a crisis on our grid if we have another hot summer like the August of 2011. One of the most significant areas of fossil fuel research in the DOE's budget is carbon capture and sequestration. And since I gathered this information on sequestration.mit.edu, I assume you're aware of a DOE-supported, I guess you call it CCUS project, at the W.A. Parish Power Plant outside of Needville, Texas, in my district. The goal of this project is to decrease CO2 emissions by 90% with appropriate reductions in SOx, NOx, and mercury emissions. The captured CO2 will be used for enhanced oil recovery operations in nearby old oil fields. DOE issued its final EIS on March 15th of this year with the finding of negligible to minor environmental impacts. The W.A. Parish plant is leading the CCUS research, but they will tell you, like you said here, CCUS is not ready for prime time. Unfortunately, EPA, well, let me step back. CCUS is not realistic for many power plants. We're unique because we're so close to a former oil field. Unfortunately, EPA is not waiting for DOE to do the research, and they propose regulations that essentially mandate the use of unproven CCUS technologies on any new coal-fired power plant. My state needs power, but the EPA is effectively banning a major source of new generation by requiring unproven technology in our power plants. And since W.A. Parish has committed to invest $163 million in this project, you commit to work with them to see if their unique circumstances for CCUS are economically viable from a market perspective.
I'd certainly be happy to be briefed by them and to discuss with them, yes.
And help them get EPA out of the way.
Well, I think that's where we'll have to see what the situation is.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your commitment. And as you know, another tool you have to help my home state avoid blackouts is Section 202C of the Federal Power Act. Under Section 202C, DOE has the authority to order a power plant to run during an emergency, even if that would cause a brief violation of environmental laws. Unfortunately, EPA and environmental groups have usurped DOE's authority, 202C authority, by bringing lawsuits which have resulted with power plant owners paying fines for complying with DOE regulations and orders. 2 weeks ago, the House passed my bill, H.R. 271, to prevent this regulatory trap. Last Congress, it was favorably discussed by the FERC commissioners and your predecessor, Secretary Chu. The Senate has yet to take up the bill, so I'm going to go Texan and shoot straight. Do you support my bill, H.R. 271?
Sir, I will have to study it first, but it sounds like an issue I should get up to speed on. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And finally, your department has some critical decisions ahead of it on LNG exports. My support for LNG exports comes from a strong belief in free markets and my state's booming energy production. But most importantly, LNG exports can sustain our national security, strengthen it by developing relationships with countries that are important to the United States of America. One of those countries is India. There is a vibrant Indo-American community in my district. Our relationship with India is key, and our Indian allies can either buy gas from us or buy gas from nations like Iran. My first question, I'm running out of time here, is do you support energy exports, yes or no?
Well, again, I will be evaluating the export applications on a case-by-case basis expeditiously. I might also add I will be in India in 2 weeks.
Great, great. Bring this up. They'll bring it up for you, I guarantee you. I'm out of my time. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Following up on LNG, multiple studies of LNG exports have pointed out that the U.S. Projects are in a race to meet worldwide demand for LNG with international projects all around the world. Do you agree that delays in the DOE permitting process are putting U.S. export projects at a disadvantage compared to competing projects in the Middle East, Russia, and elsewhere?
Well, I'm not sure I'd characterize delays. I mean, I'm starting my own process now
Yes,
expeditiously, but I do want to point out the pitfalls of litigation, et cetera, are there, so we have to do it right. So I want to be very, very systematic, transparent, and march through these as expeditiously as I can.
And I would also be remiss, being a representative from Virginia, even though I'm a long way from the shore, that Virginia believes that we have a lot of natural gas untapped offshore and would love to be able to get to that and any oil that might be out there as well. And that's been the policy of at least the House of Delegates in Virginia since 2004 when I was there, and has been the policy of the state as a whole, I think, for about the last 4 or 5 years. But if you could expedite that, that would be great. We're ready to get started.
Not my lane.
I understand. I will tell you that it's interesting when you study all of these issues and you look at the environment, you look at ways and problems and things that we have to move forward on, and it's one of those things that I've always loved is that in the 1890s, the major cities of the world, particularly northeastern United States and some others, were very concerned about the environmental problem that they were having with dealing with dead horses. And through technology, we were able to move forward without having that problem. They worried about having to deal with manure as high as 30-story buildings and the environmental impact of not being able to get the decaying horse carcasses out of the streets in a timely fashion when the population rose. And they were looking at projections out to 1930 and 1950. That being said, you were, I believe, the co-chairman of a group at MIT that did a report in 2007 on the future of coal. And while there are a number of difficulties that people look at with coal, there's also some really interesting technological advances that are moving forward. And so I would ask, why, when we look at the budget, do we not see more money being spent on looking at some of these technological advances that have come forward? And I would point to a number of things. One of the things that was mentioned there was a chemical looping, and that was mentioned in that report. And now it appears that an Ohio State University professor, whose first names I'm not familiar with how to pronounce, but his last name's easy, I think, Fan, has come up with a way to use coal. Obviously, it's in the preliminary stages, but to burn or to get the energy out of coal with virtually no pollutants. A little coal ash leftovers is about it. And he's now taking that, or they're taking that to Alabama, and DOE has some money in that. But I'm wondering why, when we look at reports, and I'm looking at one of the charts that we were provided, budget for applied energy, I'm wondering why we don't have more money going into projects like that to see if we can't make this technological feasible, since we are, in fact, in the United States, the kings of coal throughout the world.
Well, again, there is, I'll repeat, but not go into detail, there are, of course, the huge amount of money sitting there in advancing the CCS projects, some of which are also advancing the technologies along the lines you're saying. For example, one of the projects is a so-called oxy-combustion project, as opposed to a conventional boiler, et cetera. The chemical looping, very, very interesting. As was already said, we do have an increased focus on carbon capture technologies. So, I think also advanced materials, very important for ultra-supercritical.
I think that means that we can count on you to embrace, develop, and ensure the success of these types of programs for transformational coal technologies. All right. And I just have a few seconds left, but I would ask that you continue to work in those directions and do fund, I believe it is the National Energy Technology Laboratory that's been working with the Ohio State project, even though they've only got $5 million. It was 15 years in the development. But I do have to say, when I look at this chart and I see, biomass and biorefineries ahead of coal, I am disturbed by that, because I really believe that with our great resource out there of coal, that finding a way to make everybody happy in burning it and giving jobs back to the 9th District that have been stripped away over the last few years is extremely important, and I would encourage you to continue to pursue that and count on me in any way that I can be helpful in moving those projects forward. Thank you. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. This time recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Gardner, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I don't know if you may need a little bit more time to answer this question. I'm not sure yet. But one of the issues that I hope that you'd be able to address is the building of transmission lines to help get power to and from rural areas. My district in Colorado is the size of the state of South Carolina. In fact, it's a little bit bigger than the state of South Carolina. And there have been significant issues with the building of transmission lines on federal lands. Are you aware, and if so, what's your view of the Interagency Rapid Response Team, which is housed in your agency?
You're right. I will have to get back to you on that with more.
All right. So I would like to just ask a series of questions, if you don't mind, on the Interagency Rapid Response Team, and just perhaps get some examples of successes they've had, some measurements that you're using to define or determine success, and perhaps if you could get back with us on specific results of the RRT's efforts to this point so far, and a discussion of the process the RRT uses, recommendations for improving its effectiveness, and plans for how to implement those recommendations going forward. It's very important, I think, to development of renewable energy in Colorado and opportunities that we have on federal lands and resources. In your testimony, you cited that the President's budget increased investment for Department of Energy efficiency measures. You also state that you're instituting energy efficiency measures that reduce energy use in federal agencies and the industrial and building sectors. I was interested in your department's promotion of energy savings performance contracts. As you know, the President wrote a memorandum to federal departments and agencies on improving energy efficiency in our federal building inventory in December of 2011. It's a program where private companies take the risk on upgrading of federal buildings at no cost to the taxpayer. Can you provide an update of the use of ESPCs by the Department of Energy, and you can get back to us if you would like?
Sure, and I can note also now, well, first of all, that I'm a big fan of ESPCs. Number two, I think right now the commitments are approaching $600 million against the $2 billion target.
The overall target, right?
The overall target. And I have to admit, the end of this year is going to be pretty tight, but I think the pipeline that's in there will hit the $2 billion target. It may be a year or two later.
And I just would like to note that one of my colleagues on this committee, Peter Welch from Vermont, and I are going to be working on legislation that will encourage even more utilization of ESPCs, and hope that we could work together on the use of ESPCs.
In general, and the whole efficiency agenda is one I'd love to work with you on.
Very good. And are you consulting the President on the Keystone XL pipeline?
No, I'm not.
Do you think do you think you should be consulting with the President as Department of Energy Secretary?
Well, I think the department is prepared, of course, to provide technical analysis. Of course, the EPA is involved in terms of the environmental statements, and then Secretary Kerry, I think, is the lead.
But so far, you haven't consulted with the White House or the Department of State on the Keystone pipeline.
To date, I have personally not. Of course, Secretary Chu may have.
And what is your opinion of the Keystone XL pipeline?
I think it's a decision for Secretary Kerry.
What would your advice be to Secretary Kerry?
To evaluate all the factors in the public interest.
Very good. So no answers on that. That's quite all right for the time being. The Americans Against Fracking opposed your nomination. Americans Against Fracking opposed your nomination because of you had stated earlier today your position on fracking. Would you agree with both the Administrator Jackson, previous Administrator Lisa Jackson, as well as Governor Hickenlooper in Colorado, who have said that there's not aware of any proven case where fracking itself has affected water?
That's true to my knowledge as well.
And what did you say, or your response to Americans Against Fracking in your support of hydraulic fracturing? What did you respond to them?
Well, actually, I did not respond. I have a public record in terms of what I think. I've repeated that here today. That remains my position. Manageable, challenging, must be managed.
Can we, there's reports, Citi did a report talking about energy independence, North American energy independence, the real possibility of the American energy renaissance in this nation. Can we get to energy independence and continue the energy renaissance in this country without hydraulic fracturing?
Well, that's a difficult question. I mean, I think certainly given all of our assets, particularly in North America, I think there really is a chance that we could be net independent. Doesn't mean we wouldn't be exporting and importing, but
but can we do it without
have as many BTUs as we use?
Can we do it without hydraulic fracturing?
Well, today, obviously, it's a huge contributor. I mean, for both oil and gas. So
the answer is no. We could not do it without.
Well, I have a harder time seeing it clearly without that. But we are going to be moving, I think, increasingly, of course, to alternative technologies as well. So I can't rule it out, but clearly, if you look at
but hydraulic fracturing is a critical part of
today,
our energy.
Absolutely
future.
critical. Sure, we would not have the increased oil dependence, oil and gas production without it.
Gentleman's time's expired. This time, I'll recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important committee and for allowing me to participate. And Mr. Secretary, congratulations to you for your appointment and confirmation to what I believe is one of the most important cabinet positions in the nation right now. As you may know, my colleague from Ohio, Tim Ryan, and I have formed a bipartisan LNG export working group along with 6 Republicans and Democrats. It's a bipartisan group, and a number of them are on this committee and have already participated in this hearing today. I'm going to stay on a subject that's familiar, LNG exports, for a minute or two. We did not expect you to be sworn into your new job and start approving pending applications to export to non-free trade agreement countries overnight. Many in Congress, however, believe that the time for review has passed. You commented in just a few minutes ago in your questions that I think if I understood you right, you said you couldn't comment on the delays or what the delays were, but I can tell you that almost all of the applications have been pending for over 100 days, and at least one of them has been pending for almost 800 days. The studies have been done. So my question to you is, and I appreciate and I'm encouraged that you've said you're going to be expeditiously evaluating and planning to take action through the remainder of this year. But there's quite a bit of time left in this year, and there are a lot of applications out there. So when will you and the department start making decisions on these pending applications and that have been languishing for the better part of 2 years?
Well, as I've said, sir, I've had to get my head around it, as you have acknowledged. We're getting, I think, very close to the time. We're going to start evaluating those dockets.
Well, I would encourage you, and I'm sure you've heard this before. Let the market drive this. I mean, our private sector oil and gas folks, they'll make the right decisions given that all of the evaluations have been done. Let's open this up and let the market drive it and create the jobs that are going to come with it. Do you foresee in the evaluation process the Department of Energy working through the application list in a different order than in which they were submitted or filed, to take into account which projects may be more viable than others to build? And if so, what factors might the department look at in determining that?
Well, no, sir. I think we're going to stay with the order. I think to start injecting new subjective judgments, I think we just kind of confuse the situation and open up to more criticism and possible intervention. So,
wow, I like that answer. You're one of the first in this administration to avoid picking winners and losers here in Washington. I think that's commendable. I would again urge you to consider. Let's just get these approved, and let's let the market drive it. Let me move to another subject now. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, a subject that one of our colleagues mentioned earlier, and talk about an issue that's important not only to my constituents but to our country, and that's the issue of making sure that America has an indigenous and solely U.S.-owned enriched uranium producer. Since the Department and USEC were not able to come to an agreement to keep the Paducah plant operating, once the Department's current inventory is depleted, the government is left without a continued source of enriched uranium for national security purposes. Given this serious situation, I commend the Department for conducting a 2-year, $350 million cost-shared RD&D program to demonstrate the reliability of the U.S. centrifuge project at the Piketon facility. This program has been very successful to date, constructing over 120 centrifuge machines and associated plant systems on budget and on schedule to demonstrate the reliability of the technology. At the same time, the federal government is investing about $230 million through the end of the current fiscal year in this RD&D program, and has taken title to the centrifuge machines and the support facilities. The balance of the $48 million of federal cost-share funding is needed to complete this critical RD&D effort by year's end. And while we in Congress will continue to have the funding included in any appropriations bills, given the critical role that this program has for national security and the fact that the government is heavily invested in its outcome, can you tell me how you're going to, or what your plans are to fund the balance of the $48 million needed to complete by December 31st if we're not able to come, if the Senate and the House are not able to come to resolution on an energy and water appropriations?
I think we're going to have a discussion with the Congress and the funding. I very much want to see that demonstration ended, completed, completed, because I think that's a critical decision point for the path forward. And it would be, if successful, as you say, our only indigenous American technology.
Certainly. Well, you know the history that we've had with working with the Senate to try and get financial bills, whether they be budgets or appropriations bills, passed. So have you and the department begun thinking about how we'll come up with that $48 million in funding?
I don't have a plan for that yet, but we'll have to address it as we see how progress comes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman's time has expired, and that, I think, completes the questions. I have one additional question, Secretary Moniz, and I don't know if Bobby does or not, but we've heard a lot about carbon capture and sequestration research and funding for that research at the Department of Energy. And I was glad to hear you earlier, or someone not say sequestration, but say utilization, because there are, we hope that there will be technologies out there to use CO2 instead of storing it, maybe use it commercially in some way. And so, as Secretary of Energy, do you feel like you have the authority, the ability to direct money into research for carbon capture and utilization rather than sequestration?
Oh, yes, I think we certainly have the authorities to do that, and I think, again, ARPA-E has some ideas in terms of novel utilization techniques, but the other one is a discussion, I think, with industry, et cetera. It's not an R&D issue as such, but if the utilization through enhanced oil recovery is to scale up, we have a big infrastructure issue to look at between, probably it's a public-private partnership.
But even in addition to enhanced oil recovery, other types of utilization.
Yes, other things, building materials, et cetera.
Right.
Yes.
And then my final comment would be, I would urge you once again to use all the speed that you all have available to you on your request for proposal for the economic development at the Paducah plant.
I should have mentioned earlier, I forgot that, as you know, we have several proposals in, and we will be evaluating those.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rush.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I was a little disturbed earlier when the fine gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, would not allow you to complete your answers. So would you like to, his line of question was quite interesting, and I'm sure you have some additional comments that you want to make regarding the Mr. Scalise's question that he was asking you.
Well, I think we made our points in the discussion, so thank you. The drilling on federal lands and as opposed to non-federal lands, I think that was a pretty interesting line of question, and I wanted to hear what your real answers were. Well, okay. So, I mean, I think my answer was what I was saying, that I think that the industry is, is pretty good. It's going out there pretty hard in terms of this increased production. There's a lot of infrastructure to do, et cetera. Frankly, there are limits to the number of rigs. So personally, what I think, and there are a number of leases on federal lands that are not being used. So I think the issue is to keep your eye on the ball, that oil production, gas production is going up. It's going up at a pretty rapid pace, in fact. And so I think that's...
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Secretary Moniz, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your patience and your answer to all of our questions. And we look forward to working with you as we move forward. And thank you once again. And this hearing is adjourned.
And all the members, thank you.
Thank you.